The night nurse's discovery. Carmen Reyes stood frozen in the hospital parking garage, her car keys trembling in her hand. Behind her, footsteps echoed off concrete walls. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. She'd made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and now someone knew what she'd found in room 407. Her phone buzzed. One new message. "I know you were in that room. My name is David Harrington. For 24 years, I investigated homicides first as a Boston detective, then FBI. I've seen evil hide behind every kind of face. But this case was different, because the person who finally exposed one of the most careful serial killers in American history wasn't a detective, wasn't FBI. She was a night nurse who couldn't even call the police without risking everything she'd built in this country. This is Carmen's story, and I promise you by the end, you'll understand why silence is sometimes the most dangerous choice of all. What city are you watching from today? If this story moves you, please subscribe to Dark Case Files. We tell the stories that others won't. Flashback. 3 weeks earlier, Carmen Reyes had perfected the art of being invisible. She'd learned it crossing the border 12 years ago when she and 43 others spent 3 days hidden in a shipping container. She'd learned it working under the table at restaurants where managers paid cash and asked no questions. She'd learned it raising 2 American-born children while living in constant fear that one traffic stop, one hospital visit, one wrong word could tear her family apart. Now at 41 years old, Carmen worked night shifts at Mercy Heights Hospital in suburban Philadelphia. It wasn't the career she'd dreamed of as a girl in Guadalajara. She'd wanted to be a teacher, but it was stable, safe. The hospital didn't ask too many questions about her documents. The pay was enough to cover rent for the small apartment she shared with her mother and 2 teenage sons, Miguel and Carlos. Night shift suited Carmen. Fewer people, fewer questions, fewer chances to be noticed. "Carmen, you're on the VIP floor tonight," her supervisor Linda said during the 11 p.m. briefing. "Room 407 needs attention. Patients in hospice care, families wealthy, so keep everything pristine." Carmen nodded. VIP floor meant wealthy patients. Wealthy patients meant generous families. Sometimes they left cash tips for the nursing staff. Carmen needed those tips, Miguel needed new shoes, and Carlos's school was asking for yearbook fees she couldn't afford. Room 407 sat at the end of a quiet corridor on the 4th floor. Mercy Heights Hospital had been built in the 1950s, and despite renovations, the VIP wing still had that old money feel. Thick carpets that muffled footsteps, wood-paneled walls, private rooms with views of the city skyline. Carmen knocked softly before entering. Housekeeping. No response. She pushed the door open. The room was dark except for the green glow of medical monitors. In the bed, a man in his early 70s lay motionless, his breathing shallow and rhythmic. An oxygen tube ran beneath his nose. His chart, hanging at the foot of the bed, read, "Richard Alston, Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, DNR order, comfort care only." The man was dying. Carmen had seen it enough times to recognize the signs: the grey pallor of his skin, the way his chest barely rose with each breath. Days, maybe a week at most. She moved quietly through the room, emptying the trash, wiping down surfaces, checking that fresh towels were stocked. When she reached the bed, she noticed the pillow looked lumpy, misshapen. Hospital policy required pillows to be changed daily for VIP patients. Carmen hesitated. The man seemed deeply asleep. She could leave it. But Linda had said pristine. Carefully, she slid one hand beneath Richard Alston's head, lifting gently. With her other hand, she began to remove the pillowcase. The fabric felt unusually heavy. She unzipped the case. Something fell onto the floor with a soft clatter. Carmen froze. On the white tile, 9 laminated cards lay scattered. Driver's licenses. She bent down, picking one up. Jessica Martinez, age 29, Philadelphia, PA. The photo showed a young woman with long dark hair and a bright smile. Carmen picked up another card. Sarah Kim, age 24, Camden, NJ. Another. Vanessa Chen, age 31, Wilmington, DE. Carmen's heart began to pound. She gathered the cards quickly, spreading them on the bedside table under the dim light. 9 driver's licenses, 9 different women, all young, all in their 20s and 30s. Why would a dying old man have these hidden in his pillow? She looked at the man in the bed. Richard Alston's eyes were still closed, his breathing unchanged. Carmen's hands were shaking now. She knew she should put the cards back, leave the room, forget what she'd seen. This wasn't her business. She was just the cleaning staff. But something felt deeply, horribly wrong. She pulled out her phone and quickly photographed each license. Then she slipped them back into the pillowcase, re-zipped it, and slid it back under Richard Alston's head. As she backed toward the door, her eyes never leaving the sleeping man, she nearly screamed when a voice spoke from the bed. "Nurse." Richard Alston's eyes were open now, looking directly at her. Carmen's throat went dry. "I'm not a nurse, sir. Just housekeeping. I was changing your pillow." The old man's lips curled into the faintest smile. "How thorough of you." Carmen couldn't speak, couldn't move. "I'm very tired," Richard Alston said softly. "Please close the door when you leave." Carmen fled. Carmen didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small apartment's kitchen, the lights off, staring at the photos on her phone. 9 faces, 9 names, 9 women who looked so alive in their driver's license photos. Her mother Rosa shuffled into the kitchen at 4 a.m., tying her bathrobe. "Miga, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine, Mama. Just tired." Rosa sat down across from her. At 68, Carmen's mother had the kind of weathered face that told the story of a hard life, decades working in factories, raising children alone after Carmen's father left, crossing the border in her 50s to help Carmen with the boys. "You're not fine. I know my daughter. What happened at work?" Carmen wanted to tell her, wanted to tell someone, but the words wouldn't come. Because telling someone meant making a choice, and every choice Carmen could imagine ended badly for her family. The next morning, Carmen did something she'd avoided for 12 years. She went to the public library and used the computer. She searched Jessica Martinez, missing Philadelphia. The results loaded slowly. Then Jessica Martinez, 29, missing since 2019. Family still seeking answers. Carmen's stomach dropped. She clicked the article. Jessica Martinez was last seen leaving her shift at a nursing home in South Philadelphia on March 14, 2019. She never arrived home. Her car was found abandoned near the hospital district. Police investigated but found no signs of foul play. The case remains open. Near the hospital district. Near Mercy Heights. Carmen searched the next name, Sarah Kim. Missing. Sarah Kim, 24. Vanished without trace in 2020. Sarah Kim, a medical technician, disappeared after finishing a late shift at Mercy Heights Hospital. Carmen's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. She searched each name, one by one. All 9 women. All missing. All last seen near or working at Mercy Heights Hospital. All between 2017 and 2023. And all cases had gone cold. Carmen closed the browser and sat back, her mind racing. Richard Alston had these licenses, hidden in his pillow. Why? Trophies? Evidence? Some sick collection? She had to tell someone. But who? The police? Carmen imagined walking into a police station. "Hello, I'm an undocumented immigrant, and I found driver's licenses belonging to missing women in a hospital patient's pillow. How long before they called ICE? How long before she was in a detention center, separated from her sons? The hospital? Even if they believed her, they'd have to investigate. There would be reports, forms with her name, her information. Someone would look into her background. Her priest, Father Miguel, was kind, but what could he do besides pray? For 3 days, Carmen said nothing. She went to work, avoided room 407, and felt the weight of those 9 faces pressing down on her chest every hour. On the 4th night, Miguel found her crying in the bathroom. "Mom, What's wrong? Her 16-year-old son stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. He looked so much like his father, the father who'd stayed in Mexico when Carmen made the impossible choice to leave. Nothing. Mijo. Just tired. You're always tired lately. Is work okay? Carmen wiped her eyes. Work is fine. But Miguel didn't move. Mom, Carlos and I know things are hard. We know you work extra shifts for us. We know you worry about stuff. He meant deportation. They never said the word, but it hung over their family like a storm cloud. I'm okay, Miguel. I promise. He hugged her. Then this boy who was becoming a man, who was getting college recruitment letters for soccer, who had been born in this country and had opportunities Carmen never dreamed of. I love you, Mum. After he left, Carmen sat on the bathroom floor and made her decision. She couldn't stay silent. Not for 9 women. Not for 9 families who were waiting, wondering, hoping for answers that Carmen alone could provide. But she couldn't go to the police, so she did something else. Carmen typed carefully, using the library computer again. True crime investigators, private help, anonymous. The search results showed podcasts, YouTube channels, TV shows. She clicked through several, looking for something that felt trustworthy. Then she found it. Dark Case Files. The website was professional but not flashy. The mission statement read, "We investigate cases that the system has forgotten. We fight for victims who have no voice. If you have information about an unsolved case, you can share it with us anonymously. We protect our sources, always." At the bottom, anonymous tip form. Carmen read that line again. We protect our sources, always. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. Once she sent this, there was no going back. She began to type, "My name doesn't matter. I work at Mercy Heights Hospital in Philadelphia. I found 9 driver's licenses hidden in a patient's pillow. They belong to missing women. I took photos. I can't go to police. Please help these families find answers." She attached the photos and hit send before she could change her mind. Dark Case Files Office, Boston. 2 days later, David Harrington's phone pinged at 6:47 a.m. He was already at the office, going through case files with his second cup of coffee, when the encrypted tip notification appeared. He opened it. By the time he finished reading, his coffee was cold. David immediately called Sam Reeves, his forensic specialist. "Sam, I need you to run something. 9 names. I'm sending them now." "It's 7 a.m., David." "I know. This can't wait." While Sam worked, David contacted Marcus Chen, the team's criminal psychologist. "Marcus, I need a preliminary profile. I think we're looking at a serial killer who's been operating out of a hospital for at least 6 years. Hospital-based." Marcus's voice sharpened with interest. "That's rare. Most healthcare serial killers are active staff doctors, nurses. They kill their own patients. This feels different. The source says the IDs were hidden in a patient's pillow. A patient in hospice care. A patient." Marcus went quiet for a moment. "David, if this patient is dying, we're on a clock. If he dies, whatever evidence is in that room could disappear." David hung up and immediately called Jake Morrison, his street investigator. "Jake, I need protection for a source. Undocumented woman in Philadelphia. She's sitting on evidence that could bring down a serial killer, and she's terrified." "I'm on it," Jake said without hesitation. "What's her name?" "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out." 72 hours later, Carmen's apartment. The knock on the door came just after midnight. Carmen was awake. She'd barely slept since sending that message. When she looked through the peephole, she saw a tall, middle-aged white man in a leather jacket and an older black man who looked like he'd been a cop. Her heart hammered. "ICE, police, Carmen Reyes." The white man said quietly, "My name is David Harrington. This is Jake Morrison. We're from Dark Case Files. We're here about your tip." Carmen's hands shook as she opened the door. "How did you find me?" "We're investigators," David said gently. "But I want you to know we're not law enforcement anymore. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help." Jake stepped forward. "Ma'am, I spent 30 years as a Detroit cop. I've seen situations like yours before. We're not calling ICE. We're not calling anyone. This conversation stays between us. Carmen let them in. For the next hour, she told them everything. David listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail. When she finished, David pulled out his phone and showed her photos. "Do you recognize these women?" Carmen gasped. They were the same faces from the driver's licenses, but these were missing persons posters. "We ran the names you sent," David said. "All 9 women are officially missing. All were last seen near Mercy Heights Hospital between 2017 and 2023. And here's what we found." He swiped to another image. They all worked in service positions: cleaners, food service, medical technicians, low-profile jobs. "Like me," Carmen whispered. "Like you," David confirmed. "Which is why we need to be very, very careful. This killer has a type: women he perceived as vulnerable, invisible, women he thought no one would look for too hard." Sam Reeves had joined the call remotely. Her voice came through David's phone. "Carmen, I need to ask you something important. Did you touch the driver's licenses?" "Yes, I picked them up. I took photos." "Good. That means your fingerprints might still be on them. When police eventually process that room, we can prove you were there. That protects you if the story changes." Marcus's voice joined the call. "Carmen, I need you to tell me everything you can about Richard Alston. How did he behave when he saw you? What did he say?" Carmen described the moment, the way he'd smiled, the casual tone of his voice. Marcus let out a slow breath. "That's not surprise. That's confidence. This man isn't worried about being caught. Even in his final days, he feels in control. That level of ego suggests he's been doing this a long time without consequence." David leaned forward. "Carmen, here's what we're going to do. Jake is going to stay in Philadelphia. He's going to make sure you and your family are safe. Sam is going to work with local authorities anonymously to get eyes on room 4. And I'm going to build a case that's so airtight, when we finally expose Richard Alston, there will be no way for him to escape justice." "But what about me?" Carmen's voice broke. "If this goes to trial, they'll need me to testify. They'll need my name." David looked her straight in the eyes. "Then we'll make sure that by the time this case goes to trial, you have protection. Legal protection. I have contacts immigration lawyers who specialize in U-visa cases." "What's that?" "A visa for victims or witnesses of serious crimes. If you're the key witness in bringing down a serial killer, you qualify. It's a path to legal status." Carmen felt tears streaming down her face. For 12 years she'd lived in fear, and now for the first time it didn't involve betraying those 9 women. "What do I do next?" she asked. David smiled. "You go back to work. You be invisible again, and you let us do what we do best." The team assembled the next morning. Sam connected via video from her lab, her face drawn from lack of sleep. Jake called in from Philadelphia, where he'd positioned himself at a coffee shop across from Carmen's apartment building. Marcus sat across from David, his notebook already filled with scribbled observations. David put up a whiteboard. At the center, Richard Alston, 73. "Let's start with what we know." Sam's screen split to show database results. Richard Alston, born 1951 in Hartford, Connecticut. Retired orthopedic surgeon. Worked at 4 different hospitals over his career: Hartford Memorial, Mercy Heights, Philadelphia, Johns Hopkins briefly, and back to Mercy Heights. He specialized in joint replacement surgery. "Access," Marcus said immediately. "Orthopedic surgeons have odd hours. They get called in for emergencies, trauma cases. Patients trust them implicitly. He would have had keys, credentials, access to all parts of the hospital at all hours." And Sam continued. "He retired 5 years ago, in 2019. But look at this." She pulled up more data. "I cross-referenced his hospital schedule with the missing women's disappearances. Every single victim worked at Mercy Heights during periods when Alston was on staff. David felt that familiar cold certainty settle in his gut. The pieces were fitting. "Personal life?" he asked. "Divorced twice. No children. Lives alone in a townhouse in Center City, Philadelphia. Before his cancer diagnosis 6 months ago, he was quiet. Neighbors describe him as polite but distant. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. The profile of a man who'd learned to hide in plain sight." Marcus tapped his pen against his notebook. "We're looking at an organized killer. Someone who plans meticulously. The trophy keeping those driver's licenses, that's classic. He needs to relive the control he felt. But hiding them in his hospice pillow, that's arrogance. He believes he's untouchable even now." "Why these women specifically?" David asked. "Power differential. He was a surgeon, respected, wealthy, educated. His victims were service workers, cleaning staff, technicians, food workers. Invisible women, as Carmen said. Women he could make disappear without triggering immediate major investigations. Socioeconomic predation," Sam added. "It's harder to get media attention when victims are working class. Harder to get police resources allocated." Jake's gravelly voice came through the speakerphone. "I pulled up the original missing persons reports. Half of these families were told their daughters probably left voluntarily. One detective actually wrote in his notes that the victim was transient, even though she'd worked the same job for 3 years. David felt anger tightening his chest. This was exactly why he'd left the FBI, the cases that fell through the cracks, because victims didn't fit the right profile. "We need evidence," he said. "Carmen's photos are hearsay. We need physical proof connecting Alston to these women." "I have an idea," Sam said, and her expression turned calculating. "Those driver's licenses have been in that pillowcase for years. That means touch DNA. If we can get the hospital to process that room as a potential crime scene—" "They won't without probable cause," David interrupted. "And Carmen can't be the source without exposing herself." Marcus sat forward. "What if we force Alston's hand?" Everyone turned to look at him. "He knows Carmen saw the licenses. He's dying, but he still has some cognitive function. That smile he gave her, that was a test. He was seeing if she'd run, if she'd tell. When she didn't immediately call police, he probably felt confirmed in his belief that these women are invisible, that no one cares enough to investigate." "So what are you suggesting?" David asked. "We make him think someone does care. We put pressure on him, see how he reacts." Mercy Heights Hospital. 3 days later. The package arrived at the hospital's administrative office, addressed to patient services. Inside was a single page. "I know what Richard Alston has been hiding. I know about the women. I know he's in room 407. You have 48 hours to involve the authorities, or I will." It wasn't signed. The hospital administrator, Ellen Park, read it twice, then called security. Within an hour, Philadelphia Police Detective Sarah Chen was standing in the administrative office. "This is a very serious accusation," Detective Chen said carefully. "Do you have any evidence beyond this letter?" "No," Ellen said. "But Richard Alston is a former staff surgeon. If there's any chance this is real, we'll need to interview him and search his room. But he's in hospice care that requires warrants, family notification, a lot of red tape." "Then start cutting through it," Ellen said. Her voice was harder now. "Because if this letter is real and we ignored it, this hospital will be destroyed." Room 407. 2 days later. Richard Alston had been moved to a private hospice facility. The police had arrived hours after he'd been transferred. When Detective Chen and a forensic team entered room 407, they found it meticulously clean. The pillow was gone. The bed had been stripped. Everything had been sanitized according to standard hospice transfer protocol. "Damn it," Detective Chen muttered. But Sam Reeves, who'd been consulting on the case anonymously, had anticipated this. "Check the pillow disposal," she'd told David. "Hospitals keep used linens for 72 hours before industrial cleaning." The detective called the hospital laundry. 20 minutes later, they had the pillowcase. Under blacklight, the forensic team found traces, hair fibers, skin cells, and when they carefully opened the case and swabbed the interior, touch DNA, multiple profiles. Run them against missing persons databases. Detective Chen ordered. Every single profile. Dark Case Files office. 96 hours later. David's phone rang at 3 a.m. We got matches. Detective Chen's voice was tight with controlled fury. 4 of the DNA profiles match missing women. Jessica Martinez, Sarah Kim, Vanessa Chen, Emily Rodriguez. We have physical evidence linking their biological material to Richard Alston's hospital pillow. David sat up in bed. What about the other 5 licenses? We're working on it. But 4 is enough. We have probable cause. We're getting a warrant for Alston's house, his medical records, everything. He's in hospice, David said. How long does he have? Doctors say maybe a week. Then move fast. Because if he dies before you arrest him, 9 families never get closure. We're moving. And David? Detective Chen paused. Tell your source. Tell Carmen. She may have saved lives. If Alston was escalating, if he'd recovered enough to act again, who knows what would have happened? Richard Alston was arrested in his hospice bed 3 days later. The story exploded across national news. Dying surgeon arrested in connection with disappearances of 9 women. Philadelphia PD executed search warrants on Alston's townhouse. What they found made even veteran detectives sick. A locked room in the basement. Inside, 9 boxes. Each box contained personal items belonging to one victim, jewelry, clothes, phones, wallets, and a journal. Detailed entries describing how he'd selected them, approached them, gained their trust, how he'd made them disappear. 8 bodies were eventually recovered from a property Alston owned in rural Pennsylvania. One victim, Vanessa Chen, was never found. But the evidence was overwhelming. Richard Alston died 4 days before his trial date, but the prosecution proceeded posthumously to bring closure to the families. 6 months later, Philadelphia Immigration Court. Carmen Reyes stood before a judge, her hands folded, her heart pounding. David Harrington sat in the gallery behind her, along with Jake and Elena Cortez, who'd helped prepare Carmen's immigration case. The judge reviewed the file, then looked up. Ms. Reyes, your cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of Richard Alston was instrumental in bringing justice to 9 families. Your courage in coming forward, despite significant personal risk, exemplifies the highest principles of civic responsibility. Therefore, under the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, I am approving your U-Visa application. You will have legal status for 4 years, after which you may apply for permanent residency. Carmen's legs nearly gave out. Miguel and Carlos, sitting behind her, let out whoops of joy. Outside the courthouse, news cameras waited. Not for Carmen, she'd remained anonymous throughout the trial, but for David. Mr. Harrington, this is your 3rd major case this year, exposing failures in our justice system. What drives you? David looked into the camera. Cases like this remind us that the most important witnesses aren't always the ones we expect. Carmen Reyes risked everything to speak up for women who'd been silenced. She's the real hero here. Carmen visited the office 1 month later, bringing homemade tamales for the team. I wanted to thank you, she said, hugging David. You gave me my life back. You gave 9 families their answers, David replied. That's worth more than you know. As she was leaving, Sam stopped her. Carmen? I was wondering, have you ever thought about forensic nursing? Carmen blinked. What's that? Nurses who specialize in examining victims, collecting evidence, working with investigators. With your experience, what you noticed, how you documented everything, you'd be perfect. And there are scholarship programs for people exactly like you. Carmen felt tears welling up. For 12 years, she'd been invisible by necessity. Now people were telling her she could be seen, that her presence could matter. I'd like that, she whispered. The story of Carmen Reyes reminds us of something crucial. Justice doesn't always come from the expected places. Sometimes it comes from the quietest corners, from the people we've learned to overlook. Richard Alston spent his career being seen, respected, trusted. Carmen Reyes spent hers being invisible. But in the end, her courage mattered more than his reputation. 9 families have closure now. Not all the answers they wanted, but enough to begin healing. And Carmen, she's in nursing school now, learning to be the kind of professional who notices when something's wrong, who speaks up, who makes sure invisible women stay visible. If you know someone whose story needs to be told, reach out. Dark Case Files is here. Subscribe, share this story, and never forget, the smallest witness can bring down the biggest predator.